What's going on, everyone? Online Prep Coach Ask here with prepcoach.com. Today, back with another new seminar talking about why your statins are killing you. That is not an accurate statement, though. There is no bad supplement. There's no bad drug. There's no good or bad anything, really. It's all context dependent. And in reality, this conversation is really looking at why tanking cholesterol is worse for you than letting it hang out in the middle range, but also being too hypercholesterolemic and having way too much cholesterol is just as bad. So in biology, it's always a balance. Nothing exists in these extreme ranges that are good. So in this world, we're talking about people taking statins that are tanking their cholesterols to poor numbers, rather than people that are taking statins to take their cholesterols of 500s down to like 250. So we're looking at everything being contextually dependent. Let's scroll back, let's understand the basics so we can really figure out why it's so bad, and it's just as bad to tank your cholesterol levels as it is to have too high cholesterol levels. So we have to understand the endogenous production. We have to look at the endogenous synthesis. We're beginning with glycolysis. So glycolysis is really starting off with our glucose molecule, right? That is going through glucose 6-phosphate to fructose 6-phosphate to fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. And there's a lot of other steps, but I'm going to stop it there. We're going to run out of room on this board. And it's eventually going to go into pyruvate. I'm going to put these pluses here. That means there's more steps in between fructose 1,6-bisphosphate and pyruvate. But that pyruvate is then going to come over here and go through the process of acetyl-CoA, going through the cool process of the Krebs cycle, Mr. Electron transport chain, and then ATP production. So that is how we are taking a glucose molecule and getting ATP. Now what happens is if there's too much cholesterol in the system, we see an accumulation of those acetyl-CoAs. So whenever we have this accumulation of acetyl-CoAs, it can go a couple different ways. The first way that we know, this comes from the ketogenic-based world, we can essentially have this cool offshoot production of ketone bodies. So the beta-hydroxybutirates and things like that of the world. These can go and they can do some amazing things in pretty much every area in the body. We're just going to say in the neurological, in the myological world, these could be driving up, because remember, ketone bodies do a really good job at working as intracellular communicators and signaling agents. So it could be driving different actions in different systems to improve our own endogenous production of certain peptides. It can go ahead and drive some myological actions to downstream drive anabolism, training, performance, things like that. We see in the neurological world, it can have a good ability to drive up the overall neural focus, clarity, tons of different things, being neuronal fuel, like we talked about before with acetylcholine and glucose, tons of things it does. But it can also, if there's too many acetyl-CoAs, it can also go through the actual cholesterol synthetic process. So this process is very important to understand. Because once we understand this, you will know exactly why abusing statins and tanking your cholesterol is just as bad for you as letting your cholesterol get to the 500 plus. So we have cholesterol synthesis. So remember what this is. This is acetyl-CoA plus acetyl-CoA. Those will form together to give us an acetyl-CoA, Chris aceto. Bodybuilding joke for anyone in the bodybuilding industry. If not, forget about it. So we have this acetyl-CoA. They'll then go, and here's a big one that everyone's going to know, HMG coenzyme A. What is your Lipitor? What are your citrus bergamots? What are those? HMG coenzyme A reductase inhibitors. So literally, this is where statins are mainly working as HMG coenzyme A reductase inhibitors. Important to understand, because if you shut down this process, Everything downstream we're going to talk about is not going to happen. So then we have HMG coenzyme A, and now we are going into this whole cool process of mevalonate going down into isopentyl pyrophosphate. We're going to conglomerate. We're going to get a bunch of these isopentyl pyrophosphates together, and that is going to give us something called squalene. That squalene is then going to go ahead and give us a specific form of 7-dehydrocholesterol. So we have this actual 7-dehydrocholesterol, and the cool thing about this is it's going to do two big things. First of all, it can interact with UV light, and that is how we actually drive up vitamin D synthesis. So via this interaction with that specific form of cholesterol, we can get an increase in vitamin D, or we can go through this other cascade where it interacts with actual cell membranes. This is the most important part of our conversation. What this does at the cell membrane level, if we bring it up over here and look at it, cholesterol synthesis is important to maintaining our cell membranes and maintaining endothelial function. So what this does, if you can imagine it going over to these cell walls, so literally we're going to have, put it right here, we're looking literally right there at that actual wall-based area. What we're seeing is it actually decreasing fluidity, decreasing phase transitions, and even cooler, driving glycosphingolipids. Yes, it's a real word. And we are going to see this as a whole do what? Increase cell membrane integrity. Increase the ability for that cell membrane to communicate with other portions of the cell, the body, of everything. It's going to improve its ability to send those signals, which is technically communication, but we're going to call it something different because there's differences in communications and signals, chemically, cellularly, all that kind of fun stuff. We are seeing overall health of those cell membranes improving. Why is that important? So again, we have glucose, we have cholesterol synthesis, we understand where statins work, we understand how important it is to maintaining cell membrane integrity. But why does that matter? Well, cell membrane integrity, we're really looking at endothelial function. So this is literally driving up positive endothelial function. What does that mean, Alex? Why does that matter? Look at the vasculature. So we're going to have, and now everything's going to start making sense, right? We have the vasculature, we have blood traveling through. What ends up happening is the endothelial layer is, because again, remember these are like basically, it's like muscle tissue, multiple different layers. We're looking at this single layer right here as being our endothelial layer. What happens is over time, due to dysfunction, due to a couple things we're about to talk about, is we'll start seeing that endothelial layer and all of that cell membrane integrity start to collect this junk. That junk is generally oxidized LDL particles. Other things can actually cause that and accumulate, but we're mainly looking at that. As time goes on, and if these things aren't fixed, we end up seeing more accumulation of these oxidized LDLs. This means that less blood is traveling through because overall geographical changes are happening. And then over time, this is getting bigger. And over time, if you're not fixing these things, this is getting bigger. And then let's say you go ahead and you take a statin to do this, tank this process. which although it will decrease the amount of oxidized LDLs, even though if those are decreased, even if those were gone, right? Let's say that we took our statin and it destroyed our oxidized LDLs. What did it also destroy? Our cell membranes, which destroyed our endothelial function. That endothelial layer now is just gonna fill up with more junk, more gunk, more other problems, and still have a little bit of those oxidized LDLs. So what's gonna happen? This is going to keep growing, and eventually it's going to form that actual clot, and it's going to actually stop that blood flow from occurring. If that happens in the brain, it's a stroke. If that happens in the heart, it's a heart attack. So we are looking at heart attacks and strokes as being driven by endothelial dysfunction. We can have endothelial dysfunction from having cholesterol levels way too high or cholesterol levels way too low. So what is, if we even dig in just a little bit more to really understand this at its root cause, endothelial function is really caused by an accumulation of what? Hydrogen peroxide. What is that hydrogen peroxide coming from? Everyone knows this word. Oxidative stress. So, a couple things. Understand the process. What's really causing heart attacks and strokes? Endothelial dysfunction. What is contributing to endothelial dysfunction? Oxidative stress. What could potentially make those worse? Obviously, the oxidized lipid particles. But how can we oxidize lipid particles if we have managed oxidative stress? How can we go ahead and not have a stroke or a heart attack because of these endothelial problems if you have a healthy endothelial layer? You can't. So the whole premise of taking Mr. Statin to abolish this whole process is taking care of 5% of the problem and leaving the other 95% go. So your statin is pulling down your lipoprotein scores, it's pulling down your total cholesterol, so it's getting rid of these, and yet it's making your endothelial damage worse. It's causing more oxidative stress and more oxidative load. So that's occurring because cholesterol is being tanked. It's not being managed. So that's where the numbers are very, very important. And these numbers are super interesting. So first of all, we're looking at something like, if you look at a lot of the research, because a lot of this research, it's been out there forever. The problem is it does not line up with the current medical practice. And once more and more deaths accumulate and rise, then there'll be a shift in the medical community. But it's not the doctors. It's the people above the doctors who are making the most amount of money with this, because there's a lot of money to be made in statins. That's why GW 501516 was kicked off the market, because it was literally beating statins. We'll talk about that later on. So 160 countries. Cool numbers, right? 12.8 million plus people. And what they saw was whenever cholesterol existed in these extreme ranges, all-cause mortality went up a ridiculous amount. Time and time again, this has been shown over the years and over the years. In reality, the real numbers we're looking at, if we're looking at total cholesterol, the actual numbers are 220 to 240. I don't like that range because although it's specific, it's also too specific. We have so many differences in geography of the individual, of background, of athletic status, of hormone replacement, of everything. So I tend to give a bigger range of total cholesterol being somewhere between 200 to 250. HDLs being roughly 50 plus, and LDLs being 100 plus. So if you are fixing this cholesterol metabolism synthetic process and you're having levels in this range and also blunting oxidative stress to improve endothelial function, your lipoprotein numbers will fall into the range that they need to. So looking so far downstream at just the lipoprotein numbers is a poor way to go about things because you're missing the house. You're looking for which door in that house that you have to fix whenever the whole house is crumbling. Fix the house, then you fix the door. probably a bad analogy. I'm bad at giving analogies. I don't know why I keep trying to do them, so I'm gonna try and stop those. But we're looking at this as being a pretty decent range for the majority of people, because in this is moderate. In this moderate range, we are allowing ourselves to have improved cell membrane health and integrity, which drives this entire process to improve endothelial function, which will also then eventually pull down oxidative stress and load. So that's a lot. That's a lot to take into consideration. And again, I want to make sure that it's very well understood that although this information has been out there for decades, it's not the doctor's fault for overprescribing statins. That is what is being taught. And doctors in today's society, they have it tough. If they were to speak out and start prescribing you peptides or start telling you to have cholesterol numbers that are out of certain reference ranges, then they could literally get legal action. They could get fired. They could have their license taken away from them. So to me, I don't think this is a doctor's problem at all. I mean, obviously, there's a fine balance there. I'm obviously not a doctor, so I don't understand that exact relationship, but I can only imagine how hard it is for them whenever this research has been out there forever. And then even furthermore than that, if you really want to get into the conspiracy theory thing, look at how reference ranges on blood work is changing year to year. Testosterone ranges are getting lower and lower. Cholesterol levels, those numbers are getting lower and lower. And yet people there's more heart attacks and more strokes now than ever. And yet total cholesterol and lipoprotein scores are, total cholesterol is lower than ever, and apolipo scores are better than ever, and yet we still have the same heart attacks, still have the same strokes, actually more. So in reality, what is the current dogma is not working. But again, don't take it on your doctor. Show them this video or present them with this information, with these types of research, and hopefully they can work with you. But they're fighting an uphill battle. I want to make sure I give a lot of credit to these doctors because they're fighting an uphill battle. What are they supposed to do when reference ranges, when big pharma, when med school is teaching them the wrong information, essentially? So conversation for another day. Again, I don't like to talk bad on anyone or anything, so we're gonna get off of that. But now that we understand, it's coming down to endothelial dysfunction and oxidative stress. There are a tremendous amount of things. If you have not already gone back and watched my video on being superhuman, how to have limitless energy, that was my first seminar that I did a little bit ago. I would honestly go back and read that, watch that, whatever, because that is going to teach you the basics on how you can live your lifestyle to be healthier, to improve endogenous actions on endothelial function, and how to limit oxidative stress. The highlights of that video is essentially all the basics that everyone's already said. Manage your stress, manage your sleep, have good quality water, in some way manage your diet, in some way exercise, in some way get sun exposure and get outside on the ground. It's not that hard of a concept, but it's hard to apply because there's a lot of things. We have a busy life. I get it, it's tough. But to me, if those most basic needs aren't met, don't go out and buy these supplements. These will still help, but make the lifestyle changes first. That's going to make these supplements work 10,000 times better. Truly will. So, and by the way, dietarily, what haven't we talked about? We didn't say that go keto to fix these plaque, to fix the cardiac, to fix the stroke problems. We didn't say go low carb. We didn't say go high carb. We didn't say go carnivore. Nutritional interventions matter so much, but they matter for you. Our own metabolic rates, how we dismantle and cleave and tear apart these macronutrients and micronutrients, and what you need versus what I need is so dependent upon the person. Right now, in my coaching client database, I have probably just as many people going carnivore as I have going keto, as I have going high carbohydrate, as I have doing tons of fasting, as I have eating crazy amounts of calories every single day. The range is massive. It matters on your goals and your own response. Even though on paper, let's say maybe keto or carnivore or high carb, maybe whatever your thought process is that says this is the healthiest thing for me, you apply it and you feel like trash and your blood work gets worse and your scans get worse, doesn't matter what it looks like on paper. What matters is reality. So I would not put up a wall to anything. I would have a completely open mind. I would go off of, on the nutritional world, what you see best works with your own physiology, biology, and what you really kind of believe in the most. Certain people just respond better to ketogenic-based diets. Could be how they're getting the actual beta-hydroxybutyrate. Certain people just respond so much better to high carbohydrate diets. because of differences in how they metabolize glucose. Certain people respond better to having those higher nitrogenous protein intakes with carnivore. All diets are good. Find the one that works for you and stick with that. Then make all these other changes. So with that, we're gonna move on. I think, because there's a lot here, right? If you could only be in my brain right now. I think the best thing to start off with is gonna be plasmalogens, right? And by the way, I don't think any of you want to be in my brain. I don't know how many people could handle it because I am thinking about 10 million things right now, and we have to go back and prioritize, right? So go into long-term memory, pull out of the folders, okay, this one, plasmalogen, goes first. Plasmalogens are super cool. These are specific, okay? So if we look at structurally what makes them so different is they have a vinyl ether linker at the SN1 position. That's important to understand because this is what allows plasmalogens to do all of the cool things that they do. Now, if we look in just two locations, right? In neurological tissue, we have a very high amount of ethylamine plasmalogens. In cardiac tissue, we have a high amount of choline-based plasmalogens, but plasmalogens are almost everywhere in all tissue types, cells. They are so drastically important. These are the ones that we can use to reverse and or prevent TBIs. I use it all the time in the NFL. You ever wonder what they do when they get TBI? They go into those little tents. I'm the one putting together the protocols for the Q collars, the plasmalogen supplementation, for the other cool things we do back there. Plasmalogens work that well that if NFL players are using them, you probably should too. We're using plasmalogens to reverse and prevent things like Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's. Remember, any problem where there is that neurological plaque accumulation, that plaque accumulation is protective. It's like the fat band around your stomach. It's protecting and sequestering away things, toxins, whatever you want to call them, to prevent further damage. So in order to improve, restore all that health, things like plasmalogen come into play. And they do so many things. I don't think that there's a health problem that I would not throw plasmalogens at. It's one of those things where, to me, like, the multivitamins of the world are fine, but I think the multivitamins should then also have these sister compounds like plasmalogens and some of the things we're gonna talk about today because they're that cool. Biosynthetically, we can actually drive this whole synthetic process. So we're essentially taking those plasmalogens through entire cascades to essentially give us the last is that 1-alkyl, 2-alkyl glycerol to give us the choline and the ethylamine plasmalogens. But in reality, we are never getting enough endogenously produced or in other kinds of varieties, so we have to supplement with plasmalogens. Now, plasmalogen supplementation can come in really only one form, or rather one company, and that's coming from Prodrum. I would not trust any other company out there. I don't even believe any other company can make plasmalogens. We're looking at the Prodrum company. Link in the description box below. In this one, we're looking at, there's a couple different products, but we're gonna make this a little bit more succinct because we're trying to specifically not talk about all the goodness that they do, even though they do. We're trying to keep this more specific to endothelial health and to preventing strokes, heart attacks, and atherosclerosis, basically. So we are looking at the neuro and the glial version, right? So neural and glia. Neuro is gonna be the one that is going to be more of, like, we'll say the processing speed, whereas the glia is going to be more of the repair. So we're looking at gray matter, white matter, all those cool things neurologically, but then we also have the spillover into endothelial cells because there's a high amount of plasmalogen concentration in those endothelial cells. So on top of this driving and acting as like a faux nootropic aid, on top of this allowing your brain, your kidneys, your liver, all of your organ systems to be healthier, it's directly, probably one of the best players, directly improving endothelial health. So like we talked about before, we have oxidative stress caused by hydrogen peroxide, and we have endothelial dysfunction. Again, endothelial dysfunction's upstream, but generally with these kinds of dysfunctions, we're trying to fix it and sandwich it. So downstream, we're trying to fix the actual oxidative load. Don't really care about hydrogen peroxide, that's gonna be fixed there. And then upstream, we're trying to improve the actual endothelial cells and layers after we fix our cholesterol metabolism. So we want to get our cholesterols into good ranges, and then we're going to go through this process of bringing in plasmalogens to improve our endothelial health. Now, if we go through, we're going to actually skip the biosynthetic process and cascade of how we make plasmalogens. Instead, now I think a cool one is going to be fatty 15. So fatty 15 is, I think, again, if we're trying to make this as succinct as possible, if we're trying to knock off into the other benefits, because there's a tremendous amount of benefits here. If we're looking at how we can get it in, exogenously from food sources, we tend to never get enough, especially where those food sources are coming from. The specifics, I can't remember the specifics actually, I didn't save it in long-term memory, but it was this extremely high elevation specific goat eating a specific type of grass, and people in that geographic location were living forever, not forever, but they were living longer, and it was because their actual milk had a higher amount of fatty 15. So, sounds ridiculous, but it's true, go look it up. If we're looking at what this is doing, mainly for our purposes, is it's decreasing and pulling down ferroptosis. I think that is the most important thing that fatty 15 does for this conversation. Why that is important for its ability to decrease ferroptosis is because going back, so again, we're going to go back to the cell, okay? And we're looking at this cell wall, the fatty acids in that cell wall. We're going to say that these are weak. So these are very weak in this cell wall, so it looks damaged, it looks a little beat up. Maybe, you know, we even have big gaps there. We have this overall damaged cell. These fatty acids are just destroyed because of environmental issues, because of dietary habits, because of taking too many statins and tanking your cholesterol, whatever it is, these fatty acids are weak. These puppies are just not working the way they need to. What ends up happening there is as this damage accumulates, what goes up? The oxidation of those lipids. What did we say was a big thing that they're trying to do to implement statins, to tank cholesterol, to do what? To tank oxidative LDL. We don't need to, and actually taking your statin weakens those fats in the cell membrane, which literally causes oxidative LDL. Even if you're pulling down total LDLs, you're still causing more oxidation because of that. That then leads to this whole process of ferroptosis, which is a different way that cells can kill themselves off. What that leads to, and this really sucks for people that are just abusing statins. Decreased cardiac functioning. Decreased renal functioning, so kidneys. Decreased hepatic functioning, liver. A lowering in insulin sensitivity. Generally an increase in things like diabetes, an increase in neurodegeneration. The list goes on and on and on. How funny is it that we are fixing a fat problem with fats? Right? It's funny, but this is literally how these things are working. So if we are tanking cholesterol, or if we're letting it rise too high, again, we're going to put it up here. We're going to leave it here, actually. If we're going to say cholesterol is, we'll say 150 or lower, or we'll say 250 or higher. Those are the ranges that we do not want to be in. We don't want to be above 250, and we don't want to be below 150. Ideally, we're trying to stay, we're going to say right around 200. The low 200s is where we really want to be. And I'm going to leave this up here because that's what we're looking at for overall cholesterol numbers for us to be good, healthy, and working properly. Outside of those ranges, endothelial cells get damaged. Outside of those ranges, more oxidative LDLs actually occur. So we have our plasmalogen supplementation. Again, prodrome. We have our Fatty 15, literally fatty15.com, super simple. Also link in the description box below. I'll stop saying that. We have all of these things that are now slowly changing this oxidative load stress-based problem. Now, after plasmalogen supplementation, after Fatty 15, I'm gonna sequester these off so it looks a little bit better. We have a couple different routes we can go. Do we want to go with tackling more oxidative stress, or do we want to go with more endothelial functional changes? Let's take a step back from endothelial and look at just baseline oxidation. Baseline oxidation is going to be managed a couple different ways. One of the coolest ones is going to be good old glutathione supplementation. Glutathione, so the health of every cell in our body, how much oxidative stress and load we actually have, is all based on intra to extracellular ratios of reduced to oxidized glutathione. So what we're looking at is, if you've ever read the research, we are looking at GSH being reduced. That is the usable form. So I'm going to say actionable because it can cause action. And the GSSG is essentially the oxidized form, the used form, which we can't really cause and do anything with. Now, in our body, whenever there is a high amount of oxidative load, okay, say caused by your statins, what ends up happening is we're going to use this GSH molecule, and we're going to end up seeing these two molecules then being fused together. So we essentially have these two GSSG molecules. So we're having literally after the action occurs, so we're going to say action occurs, we're going to say healing happens. After that happens, then we're going to go over here, and we're going to see two used forms of glutathione sitting there, bound together. What we want to do is recycle these. We want to find a way, there's sulfide bonds in there, we can break those sulfide bonds with something like a taurine. It's going to break those sulfide bonds. They're not going to be bound together anymore. And then what also is going to happen, just going to redraw that, is they are no longer going to be used, right? They are now going to be usable. So now we have two GSH molecules. This is generally going to be coming in the form through your medical provider in the form of an injectable glutathione preparation. We would then, if we cannot have taurine bacteriostatic water added to it, to the solution, we would take oral taurine with the actual application. And what we're going to be doing is getting more action out of our glutathione because we are changing that GSSG to GSH ratio, because as we're utilizing our GSHs and forming more GSSGs, the taurine is going to come in, break the sulfide bonds, give you more usable actual GSH. What this is doing as a whole is this is going to be the easiest way to pull down our overall oxidative load. So on our list, if we add it over here, we'll make a little cheat sheet, right? We're going to have plasmalogens, which are increasing endothelial health. We're going to have our fatty 15, which is doing what? Really decreasing oxidative LDL and overall oxidative stress. We then have our glutathione, which is again pulling down on our oxidative stress loads. Now, we are instead of going more in depth, because we could break down plasmalogens and carbon 15, or fatty 15 rather, and glutathione a little bit more. But instead, we're gonna go and we're gonna look across the pantheon of supplements, pharmacology, all that kind of fun stuff to break down other players to improve endothelial health and to directly improve that reduction in oxidative stress, to pull down hydrogen peroxide, to improve your cardiac metabolism, your neurological metabolism, to stop atherosclerosis, to stop this whole process from happening. So we're gonna slowly add to this list, right? So we have 1, we have 2, we have 3. There's a lot we can add to this list, by the way. Let's start off with another really cool one. This is actually going to be in the over-the-counter supplement world, okay? We're looking at our N-acetylcysteine. N-acetylcysteine was thought to work differently than it has been found to work over the past couple of years. So this is still kind of old information, but might be new to some people. What it does is because remember, when we're trying to produce our own endogenous production of glutathione, we are going into the bloodstream into albumin, and we have to liberate cysteine. Cysteine will then be contributed to the glutathione synthetic process, and it'll allow our own endogenous glutathione to thrive, which will complement exogenous glutathione therapies. So NAC is going into the bloodstream and liberating cysteine, which means it's going to improve endogenous glutathione action. What else it's doing is it's increasing hepatic stem cell proliferation and differentiation. Again, super important to understand that, because if we look at our liver, it does have the ability to generate its own stem cells in order to repair itself. Whenever it is under androgenic load of an HRT variety or higher, that stem cell reaction gets diminished. In the natural world, it's not diminished. But HRT, TRT, and then higher starts to slowly diminish those. NAC can do a good job of turning those back on. Or if you are over in this dysfunctional world who you are not taking TRT, HRT, but you do have a high amount of endothelial dysfunction, oxidative damage, that's still impacting your liver-based systems. It's going to downregulate how your liver releases stem cells. So NAC as an over-the-counter supplement comes in to donate more cysteine to the glutathione process endogenously. And then it's going to also impact hepatic stem cell proliferation differentiation. Pretty cool, right? Now we're going to go, and if we look at a cool product, we talked about this one beforehand. This is over at Wizard Sciences. They make the best carbon 60 out there. Now, if we look at carbon 60, it is crazy. So you can find it in its naturally occurring form. You can synthetically make it in a lab. The reason why it's so interesting and so cool is nanometer-wise, how small these things are. It is what, like 1,000th the size of a cell? It's crazy small. So it's the ability to get intracellularly, intramitochondrially is crazy easy. What it's doing carbon 60-wise is it's going inside of these cells and it is literally reducing the oxidative load in mitochondria. It's translocating, it's pulling off the oxidative load, and then it's generally sending other signals to drive up healing factors globally. So I always talk about them being like detox cascades. Essentially what it's doing is, first of all, altering the mitochondria to be healthier, number one. So we're having now less oxidatively stressed mitochondria. So that means we have healthier mitochondria. That also means that it's then driving up global detox cascades. So when we talk about detox cascades, all we mean by that, because it's like that clickbaity word, when in reality, detoxing in my terminology just means your ability to remove your own waste. Whether it's coming from exogenous source or if we're doing it endogenously, doesn't matter. It's driving up the ability to get bad stuff out, which is what we want. That indirectly is going to improve. We know this word, endothelial health. So we're going to add these two over here to the cheat sheet. 4 is going to be NAC, which is going to do what? Mainly, we're going to say increase hepatic stem cell proliferation, differentiation, proliferation, differentiation, said that wrong. And then carbon 60, which is going to go ahead and although we're talking mainly about endothelial health, the difference with carbon 60 is what it does at the mitochondria level to pull off the oxidative load of mitochondria. I think it's so novel and so specific. To me, that's the primary reason. Then we have the secondary, the tertiary, the quaternary, but to me, that's mainly what it's doing. It's pulling down that mitochondrial oxidative load. So moving on from carbon 16, I think we would be doing a disservice if we didn't talk about some thymic peptides, right? The main ones to me we're going to stick with are over in the thymic-based world. And to me, we'll put them right here. We're going to look at a couple different things. So first of all, let's actually recap a little bit. Thymic gland, middle of the chest, basically right here. And as we get older, it starts to essentially calcify, harden, stops working efficiently, stops pumping out the thymic peptides we need. And what ends up happening is we start getting sick. We start having a weakened immune system. We start having all these problems. So in the longevity community, what's done all the time over there and has been done for decades now is we're replacing what we're losing. So to me, I think the most important way to differentiate between these three is look at the glandular action. So we're going to say that this is our, we're going to say thymic peptides. We're going to say that this is our actual thymic gland, right? So we have this thymic gland. We can take these peptides to drive pre-glandular or post-glandular action. So pre-glandular is right there. I won't put anything around it. The actual glandular action is happening at the gland, and the post-glandular action is happening after. So if we kind of think about this in normal American terms, going from left to right, we are looking at things happening before the gland. So we're actually trying to convince the gland to do something in a pre-receptive state. Whereas in a receptive state, we're looking at making that gland do something, or in a post-receptive state, actually driving the end fate. So in pharmacology, with supplementation, with all this kind of stuff, it's depending upon where in the cascade you were stimulating and causing action that'll then change the end fate. So in this world with these thymic peptides, what I really care the most about is we are looking at our thymogen alpha 1. We are looking at our thymolin, and then we're looking at our thymosin alpha 1. That does not look like a 1. So if we are someone who has an immediate immune problem, generally, if we look at immediate action, we are not trying to wait to convince the gland or turn the gland on. We don't care about the gland in this state. If we need very, very acute, immediate, non-genomic action, we're going with post-glandular action of that actual thymosin alpha 1. So I'll put this over here, actually. Thymosin alpha 1, acute, we'll say immunity. And by the way, this fits into the whole reducing total oxidative load, which manages hydrogen peroxide, which then improves endothelial health indirectly. Because if you don't have a properly functioning immune system, you can't fix anything. So that's where this is all tying in. So if we need acute non-genomic, so non-genomic means right now, picoseconds, versus genomic, which means more chronic, then we're going non-genomically thymosin alpha 1, post-glandular action. If we want something long-term, over the long haul, we're trying to convince the gland, we're trying to rely on the epigenetic changes coming in pre-glandular actions. That's thymogen, that's the oral preparation, thymogen alpha 1. So we have thymogen alpha 1. And again, that's going to be more, we're going to say, epigenetic. Now, if the problems are in between, or if we need to potentiate an acute situation, that's where we say, okay, or we're looking for, again, moderate longer term changes, not epigenetically, but glandular. That's where thymolin comes in as the glandular player. So depending on if you need action now, next week, or over the next couple months, that's where it's going to tell you how to do these things. So we're going to say now, next week, and over the next couple months. That's how we are going to use these based on how these thymic peptides work in different parts of the gland. Right over there, thymolin, and we're going to say, we'll say moderate, I think is maybe the best word. And keep in mind, there's very little of this found in the research. This is what I have found over the years of implementation, of understanding the background pharmacokinetics and dynamics, and seeing how these things work in reality. So to me, in my mind, with my lens, we see thymosin alpha-1 being now, thymolin action being soon, and we see thymogen alpha-1 being the epigenetic changes you're making over the next weeks, months, years, long term. So someone like myself, I have personally done, I did an experiment, and this is actually the first time I'm talking about, so it's kind of a cool time. Running out of water. My experiment in 2024, so 2023, let's back up. 2023, I was sick 7 or 8 times. This was because I was working myself into the ground. I was doing my hill sprints. I was training 2, sometimes 3 times a day. I was not eating enough. I just destroyed myself. So a big goal for me in 2024, which I accomplished, was not get sick. I didn't get sick one time in 2024. And in 2024, I traveled to 6 places I've never been to. Because remember, I'm not a big traveler. I only travel for my family for vacation. 2024, I traveled to California. I went to multiple different locations and places over the year. Still did not get sick once. One of my protocols, understanding that I really, because after I went through that sick period, I did go through some glutathione changes, because what happens is when you're that sick all the time, endothelial dysfunction goes up, oxidative stress goes up. So lipid-wise, I was looking too good. Inflammation, HSCRP-wise, wasn't looking too good. Things could have been better. So initially, did my thymosin alpha-1 therapy, healed up. And then every Saturday and Sunday morning, I would have a very micro dose of thymogen alpha-1. So it was a long-term replace it to make the epigenetic changes that I want to my body so that my immune system is firing at 1,000% capacity. And actually today is New Year's Day, so I can literally say I did not get sick one time in 2024. There'd be an onset and I'd kick it in 12 hours, so I don't even consider that a real thing. A lot of that, I believe, was from the thymogen alpha-1. So thymogen alpha-1 to me can be a long-term chronic therapy in the background, infrequent. All of these things, by the way, that we're talking about, infrequently used. The NAC therapies, if we look at chemical strength, okay, the higher chemical strength something has, the less frequently we want to take it, because the whole thing is about creating a stress and then adapting from that stress. Stress adaptation, hands, cell yay, hands, cell yay. You get what we're saying. We've talked about that so many times before. So we want to make sure that we are not taking carbon-60 and thymic peptides and NAC and plasmalogens and carbon-15, and we're not trying to take these things every single day, or then we are never allowing ourselves to be stressed out, which means we never get an adaptation, and then you actually get more sick, not making any strides towards your health. So infrequently used for the main things, but I tend to say things like plasmalogens and fatty 15, those are ones, and NAC, those can kind of be used almost every single day, pretty much, and then glutathione might be intermittent on the weekends, or thymic peptides could only be on the weekends or only when you're sick. You can do this a bunch of different ways. So we have all of these. So we have 7. These are, to me, 7 of the more important compounds to go down. These are more of the important compounds to understand. 1, I've talked about this off and on over the years, so all the OG people that have followed me for the past 13 years, you'll have seen this, you'll see me mention this a couple times, all and every time whenever I've talked about the reversal of atherosclerosis. This is one you're going to have to memorize the CAS number, buy it, have it synthesized, and make it yourself, because no one is selling it out there yet. Look at the CAS number. You're going to find that this is the CAS number for tricapran. Tricapran, super cool. okay? 10 carbons, nothing crazy. In all of the Japanese research, it got a huge name because it dissolved plaque. Ooh, I don't look good up close. I'll stay back. It literally dissolved plaque. So we look at tricapran as being the thing that's literally going to dissolve plaque accumulation. I'll go up because we're increasing the dissolution of plaque. And it's going to increase cardiac lipid metabolism. Alex, never heard of tricapran. Mechanistically, how's it working? Peroxisome proliferator activated receptor, alpha, gamma, delta, and beta, in different chemical varieties and strengths. So this is working PPAR-wise, alpha, beta, delta, gamma. Some potential out there on paper. It should potentially decrease androgen synthesis endogenously. Never seen that play out. Does not matter for TRT plus individuals, and I almost want to say does not matter for natural individuals either. I have not seen it. It's out there in the literature. It should happen on paper. I've never seen it actually play out. Might just be a sample size problem, but there is maybe the smallest potential to decrease temporary androgen production. But again, I would say a Tongat Ali or a Shilajit or even a boron or something could skew that ratio so that there would be no androgenic-based changes. So if that's a concern, maybe go that route if you're in the natural community. If you're not in the natural community, it does not matter. But tricapran is one that no one really talks about out there. It has a tremendous amount of validity. It has been around for quite some time, but no one's ever utilized it. Again, I've talked about this on and off over the years, just like I've talked about SLU PP332. And only now, after talking about it for years, is SLU getting big. Hopefully now with this seminar, as things are catching on, more people are trying out tricapran. I do know that some people are utilizing it, which is super cool that it's getting out there. But I'm trying to mention these things so I see how good they work in application. So to me, that's where our tricapran comes in. We got to talk about GW. We're going to end on GW actually, because I think this is perfect. We'll have 10. That's kind of worked out, right? So first of all, we have our tricapran, and this is going to dissolve plaque. Obviously, tricapran is used if you already screwed up. Tricapran is used if you already have a good amount of plaque accumulation, but I also think that tricapran utilization longer term can really be a pretty cool modality in therapy as kind of preventative measures. Got to get more water next time. A little spitful left in there. We're also, you know what, man, as we're going, I just got more things to talk about. We'll talk about, yeah, we have to. I always screw up how that one's spelled. We're going to look at GW, and we're going to look at a glycocalyx-based product. Arterial Sol is the product. If we first look at GW 501516, go out there. Actually, you can't because the research has been scrubbed from the internet. Before, because we've moved multiple times, but originally back in the day, I had an individual who printed out the full studies, sent them to me because I posted up online on some forum like, hey, I'm looking for this, does anyone have it? He sent that to me just out of kindness of his heart. I have since lost it. But if you can go back in the literature, if you could somehow find it or implement it with yourself, get your own lab works and scans done, you'll find that GW 501516 has a tremendous amount of validity in improving overall lipid metabolism, better than statins, because we're not tanking your cholesterol panel, you're managing it and modulating it to be more favorable. So if I had those full studies, I would post them up because the dosages that they gave, first of all, in the studies that showed that GW 501516 caused cancer were so high that I worked out the numbers a while ago. I didn't store it in long-term memory, but people honestly wouldn't be able to afford it. And they wouldn't be able to ingest that much GW in a day for weeks and months on end. So the dosage was crazy. Not only that, but if I remember correctly, they also radio labeled GW the same as cancer. So if there was cancer in there or if there was GW in the system, they were labeled the same. They were picked up the same. So to me though, don't even go off of that. Don't go off of conspiracy theory. Trial it for yourself. Everyone, and this has to be in the couple hundreds by now that's utilized GW 50, 15, 16, we've seen the same thing time and time again. It was originally knocked off the market, I believe, because it did such a good job better than statins. And then all of a sudden they made a different form of GW afterwards that did all the same things, but didn't modulate lipids. Why would that have been done, and why would that one have been more accepted? So we're mainly looking at this as being a cholesterol modulator, right? And I say that because what we tend to see is an improvement in HDL functionality. I think that is its biggest takeaway. It improves. Remember what HDLs are doing, right? So we have our liver. That's a bad liver, whatever. It's dumping out these empty proteins called HDL proteins. They're then going, and let's say we go back to the vascular tissue. Let's say we still have that accumulation of those LDLs. It's coming to here and it's scavenging. It's scooping up and filling itself with LDLs, going back into the liver, dumping it off, and then coming back out empty and redoing that process. So HDL is extremely important to have and to understand because it's literally doing that cleaning, cleansing process. So to me, it's a cholesterol modulator because we tend to see LDL numbers go slightly down, HDLs go slightly up, but more so if we look at the lipoproteins of the HDL potential, that's going up and improving. So to me, GW is mainly an HDL player, but you could term it a couple different things. I don't think there's a good enough terminology out there yet for it because we just have not studied it enough. But on lab works, we always see improved cholesterol values, improved LDL values, and improved HDL values. And I like to say, again, HDL functionality because of what it's doing with our lipoproteins. So that's the one. So we're going to say mainly that HDL player. And now we're going to end with, and I hope I do not spell this product name wrong, Arterisol from Calroy. Now, going back, remember how we said, if we zoom into here, zoom in, okay? We said beforehand how we have this endothelial layer right there. We have our blood right there. There's another layer right here. I believe, I always spell that word wrong. So if I got it wrong, correct me down below and I apologize. That glycocalyx layer, that's this jelly-like layer that will not allow particles to stick if it is at a high enough capacity and functioning properly. So literally, if we go back and say, let's say worst case scenario, you're taking statins that are tanking your cholesterol, you are having tons of oxidative stress, you are having all these endothelial-based problems, this product from Calroy, Arterisol, is going to modulate the glycocalyx layer to then stop and down-regulate. It's not going to completely turn off, but it's going to down-regulate the potential of those oxidized LDLs to bind and to cause. So instead of, let's say, forming a huge protrusion like that in invagination, let's say instead you're only getting that much. So it can dampen the effects of oxidative stress and endothelial dysfunction dramatically. Versus if you're already healthy and then you're still taking your glycocalyx, it's almost impossible to ever have plaque formulation and accumulation. And more importantly, because actually that can't happen, that's the wrong statement, it's almost impossible to actually have a heart attack or a stroke from that because of how that jelly-like layer of fluid is taken care of. So Arterisol is literally improving that glycocalyx layer, which we're going to say is the lube of our vasculature that we need to stop things from sticking. So glycocalyx, I'm going to say the most positive and the most professional vascular lubricant, right? I think that sounds like a good term. So we have our top 11. Statins are not bad. Doctors prescribing statins are not bad. Big pharma that's making a ton of money off of statins, they're still not bad in reality, because if you have a total cholesterol value of 300 plus, you're terrible. If you're taking statins and it's pushing your total cholesterol below 150, that's just as bad. Don't look at things in black and white terms of doctors are good, doctors are bad. Statins are good, statins are bad. Statin abuse is killing America, but at the same time, we can change that. If we go through, rewatch this video, take your notes, and look, the top 11 tools in my mind are our plasmalogens, our fatty 15, our glutathione, our N-acetylcysteine, our carbon-60, our thymogen alpha-1, thymosin alpha-1, thymolin, tricaprin, GW501516, and our glycocalyx arteriosyl product from Calroy. I think that if we can slowly shift the paradigm back into getting healthy cholesterol numbers, heart attacks and strokes are going to be going down. And I don't think that, I know that, because none of my clients that are working with me are having heart attacks or strokes or vascular-based problems. If people are coming to me with those issues, we are massively fortifying against those from ever happening again, because we are fixing and we're decreasing oxidative stress, which decreases hydrogen peroxide, which decreases endothelial dysfunction. Those three main things. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Check out thepepcoach.com. See you next time.